The second day of Week 4 of the Overwatch League 2019 season had been billed and hyped to be one of the most exciting and entertaining days of the season so far, whilst Day 3's games each held significant playoff and standings implications. With most of the matchups expected to be competitive, it's time for me to break down what happened in this review. Day 2 began with two teams that play GOATs at top gear as the Paris Eternal took on the Vancouver Titans. With a win, Paris would steady the ship after last week's collapse to Atlanta, whilst the Titans were looking to lock up their Stage 1 playoff spot with their 5th win. On Control, we saw how close this series was going to be, with both teams trading teamfights back and forth, leading to multiple overtimes. What was impressive, however, was the number of times at this early stage the Titans were able to win teamfights after losing the first player, which in many cases was Bumper, who used his death to create all the space that his team needed, as Vancouver went 1-0 up. His mega aggression did at times cost his team fights, but what killed the Eternal more was the poor use of their support ultimates, which were often used too early, and Gravitons, which Janu was having a field day in eating, as Paris threw away their strong time bank on Numbani to give Vancouver the second map before halftime. Another note to make was that Shadowburn made his 2019 debut for Paris on Zarya, being subbed in for Soon after Game 1. But this appeared to have little impact as the series continued. With Horizon a must-win map, Paris went all out, but once again fell short, largely due to the same issues from before, by misusing their support ults or managing to lose teamfights despite having man advantages. As is now usual, Bumper did his best to feed with one of the most outrageous Earthshatter attempts I've ever seen, but in the end his teammates were able to make up for this and guarantee the victory. One bright spot for the Eternal was a play of Bembest, who had a mature performance and penalised Bumper when he was out of position. The match finished on Rialto, and to add insult to injury, Vancouver went on to steamroll Paris and give the Titans a 4-0 win in one of the most one-sided maps of the match, which was only made slightly close after an unexplainable ghost backcap by Cruz. With this win, Vancouver locked up their playoff place, whilst the second consecutive 4-0 defeat for Paris leaves their team with major questions and puts them at a major disadvantage in their quest to make stage playoffs. After this series came my personal game of the week as the New York Excelsior looked to finish the stage undefeated against an impressive San Francisco Shock side. The first key thing I'll mention about this series is how much of an injustice the final score ended up being, as it definitely did not fairly represent how close this series really was. San Francisco pushed New York to their limits throughout, with Violet keeping Jonak in check for parts of the series, whilst also forcing the Excelsior to play the Shock's aggressive playstyle at times. They achieved this with Super and Sinatra playing in a more mature and less gung-ho manner, which at first seemed to catch their opposition a little confused and off guard. Ultimate management was very impressive on the whole, as the two sides battled back and forth, only really getting wins off the back of picks when an individual made minor errors. The reason I mentioned the injustice of the final score was that despite a lot of these heading into overtime, which they could have gone either way, New York ascended to a greater level of play than they've shown so far this season, and managed to clutch out every single map for the 4-0 victory, and hence finish the stage undefeated, as they get a week off before the stage playoffs. San Francisco easily demonstrated that they are one of the top teams in the league with this performance, but due to their strength of schedule, it leaves them in a precarious position where they might miss out on the Stage 1 playoffs. Day 2 concluded with a rematch of the 5-map series between the Dallas Fuel and the Shanghai Dragons, which some like me argue luckily fell in Dallas's favour last week. Map 1 on Nepal suggested that we could again look forward to another competitive series, with the teams going back and forth, but it also foreshadowed some issues on the side of the Dragons. In this map and in others, Shanghai mixed up their roster compared to their largely unchanged side in the last week's series, and it was ultimately to their detriment. At times the team just seemed a little uncoordinated and mismanaged their ultimates, which Dallas took no hesitation in exploiting to their advantage. Dallas went into the half 2-0 up, meaning Shanghai would need a reverse sweep to claim victory here, but unfortunately this was not to be, as the Fuel came out of the break inspired to finish up the series, and finish it they did in a lot more convincing style than the first half of the map. as they comfortably took the final 2 maps to win the match 4-0, the third time we saw this scoreline this day, and set themselves up for a likely playoff position. The loss all but ensures the Dragons will miss out on the Stage 1 playoffs, and they'll need to re-evaluate their lineup again if they wish to firm up the foundations to build on their first win a couple of weeks ago. Following this, we headed into Saturday and day 3 of matches, with most of them holding the potential for major shifts in the standings with little time left before the Stage 1 playoffs. We kicked off with 2 Western teams that have been very poor up to this point, as the LA Valiant, who were looking to avoid a winless stage, took on the Houston Outlaws. Anyone hoping that this series would be competitive between 2 below average sides got their wish. However, it was in the worst way imaginable, as to be perfectly honest, this series was horrible to watch. Throughout, ultimate management was shocking. Teams somehow kept losing teamfights despite having both ultimate and numbers of advantages. And to not go into any more detail, it felt like the sides were just throwing and feeding very often. In the end, there had to be a winner, and this was narrowly the Outlaws 2-1, off the back of a decent Route 66 defence, which keeps their slim playoff hopes alive. This meant on the flip side, the memes exploded behind the We Are 0-7 LA Valiant, who despite some clutch moments from Space and Izzyaki, have to pick up the pieces over the next couple of weeks if they want to salvage their season from next stage. After this terrible match, came one that didn't inspire others' confidence either, as the Seoul Dynasty faced the Washington Justice. However, one interesting dynamic we saw once the teams walked out was a change in lineup for Seoul, as Toby, Zumba, Fitz and Marvel were subbed in, with only Jae-Hong and Fletter keeping their places. Consequently, we saw a completely different playstyle from the Dynasty, which seemed to both suit the team a lot more, but brought them a lot of early success. Unlike previously, where they would play aggressively behind Fisher, the team would play a lot more slowly, and would look to counter-engage in a way akin to the New York Excelsior. This continued through the first 3 maps, and saw Seoul guarantee the series up 3-0. Washington as usual did not impress, and were inexplicably allowing Jae-Hong to position himself without much pressure onto him. To their credit, they punished Marvel's poor positioning on Dorado, and ended up taking that map, as they lost the series 3-1, and eliminated themselves from the stage playoff picture. On the flip side, Seoul have left themselves likely needing to beat London next week to advance, and it will be interesting to see if this was just a B-team lineup, or a style they might be looking to utilise moving forward, as players like Zumba and Ryu Jae-Hong played incredibly well. The third match of Saturday saw the contest between 2 sides trending upwards, as the Guangzhou Charge went against the LA Gladiators, who had looked to have finally found their feet. The Gladiators looked like the team we thought they would be at the beginning of the season in their last game, and this once again continued into this game, with both the front and back line coordinating perfectly with one another, allowing Decay to truly shine. This didn't necessarily look the case after map 1 on the pool, where the flexibility of the Charge caught LA out, as it allowed players like Hotba, Shu and Happy to excel. Yet, once the game returned to the more regular 3-3 GOATS meta, the Gladiators never looked back, and took the following 3 maps with relative comfort to win the series 3-1. In spite of defeat, whether or not Guangzhou make the Stage 1 playoffs now depends on the result of their game against the Titans next week, where they will need to rely on their flexibility to succeed. Meanwhile, it is a shame that despite this win, the LA Gladiators have found their form too late into the stage, and are very unlikely to make the stage playoffs, even though they now appear to be a top team in the league. Day 3 concluded with the intriguing game between the unpredictable Hangzhou Spark and the so far impressive Toronto Defiant, with both sides looking to shore up a stage playoff spot. Whilst this series was rather competitive, with most of the maps running close between the 2 sides, even drawing on Volskaya, Toronto always looked like they were in firm control, with the same trio of Ivy, Envy and Neko again the standouts. The Spark, when coordinated, played like the really solid side. Once again, some poor ultimate management and also confusing team comps held them back, particularly their insistence to run Winston Goats when they had the opportunity to switch to the widely regarded superior Rhine Goats. The Defiant took their chance as well and won the series 3-0 in the end to lock up their position in the Stage 1 playoffs as one of the dark horses to win it. Hangzhou, on the other hand, are now very unlikely to make the stage playoffs with their 3-4 record, but can be content with how their first stage has gone. Looking now at my predictions, these 2 days brought me further success as I went 5-2. I think I put too much hope in the Dragons after last week's performance, and I did not expect Dallas to be so relentless. Equally, I didn't trust the memes and thought that the Valiant wouldn't end the stage winless, even though they have had every opportunity to win this game. The only other comment I would make would be how well the Vancouver Titans and the New York Excelsior were in finishing off maps and taking their series, despite being competitive 4-0. Week 4 concludes this Sunday with another 4 entertaining matches. The Paris Eternal face the San Francisco Shock with major playoff implications on the line, before London look to shore up their playoffs position against the Shanghai Dragons. The Florida Mayhem look for another win as they take on the Boston Uprising, before the Vancouver Titans' non-meta play is tested as they play the Chengdu Hunters. With that, I'd like to thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed for more Overwatch League content moving forward.